So today, we're going to explore a really powerful idea from a recent sermon. This concept that being alone isn't just about feeling lonely, but it might actually be our single greatest spiritual danger. Let's break down why. So, why is being alone considered such a spiritual danger? Well, the material we're looking at frames this not just as a feeling, but as a real spiritual battleground. It makes a bold claim that our isolation isn't just a random circumstance, it's actually a strategy, a tactic being used against us. Okay, so what is this main tactic? According to the sermon, the adversary, Satan, doesn't have some big, complicated plan. Nope, the entire strategy actually boils down to one single move, a move that makes every other attack possible. And here it is. The core idea is that all of those destructive things, the stealing, the killing, the destroying, they don't just happen. They all start with one critical first step: separation. You have to be isolated first. And to really drive this point home, the sermon uses this incredibly vivid metaphor from Scripture. I mean, just think about how a predator actually hunts. A lion's not going to just charge right into the middle of a big, strong herd, right? That's just, well, it's a terrible idea. It's dangerous. Instead, what does it do? It prowls around the edges, looking for the one that's strayed, the one that's lagging behind, the one that's all by itself. And that whole predator-prey idea, it leads us straight into a really central parable used in the sermon. Now, you've probably heard this story before, but here it's used to make a very specific point about this very kind of vulnerability. On the surface, this just seems like a bad risk. I mean, why would you endanger 99 for just one? But the sermon explains the shepherd's thinking. See, the shepherd knows that an isolated sheep isn't just lost in the woods somewhere. No, it's a sitting duck. It's a guaranteed target. It's no longer a question of if a predator will get it, but just a matter of when. And this right here, this really lays out the two sides of the coin, the whole point of the teaching. On one side, you have the lone sheep, vulnerable, a target, completely defenseless. And on the other, you have the flock, protected, supported, strong. But to really nail this down, the sermon doesn't just stop with parables. It brings up two really stark, kind of scary examples from the Bible to show you what can actually happen, the real consequences of being spiritually isolated. Okay, so our first cautionary tale comes from the Gospel of Matthew. It's about a man who gets freed from a single evil spirit. Now, you think that's the end of the story, right? A total victory. But things take a really dark turn because of what happens next. And the sermon really focuses on one crucial word here: empty. See, the man was cleaned out, but he wasn't filled with anything good to take its place. He was spiritually empty, alone. And that void, it acted like a vacuum. It became an open invitation for a much, much worse invasion, leaving him way worse off than he was at the start.
And the second story, well, it's about one of the most well-known figures in Christianity, Judas Iscariot, one of Jesus' own 12 disciples. And his story is laid out as the ultimate tragedy of choosing to be alone.
So the teaching points to that one crucial moment, the moment Judas physically gets up and leaves the other disciples. The scripture even says he went out, and it was night. And in that darkness, both literal and spiritual, completely cut off from his friends, his support system, that's when he became vulnerable. That's what led to his tragic end.
Okay, so if isolation is the big problem, what's the answer? Well, logically, the sermon lays out a really clear and powerful solution. It starts with a simple idea and builds up from there. And it all starts with this passage from Ecclesiastes. And the point here isn't just about having company to feel less lonely. No, it's about a practical, mutual support system. It's literally designed for rescue. So, this sermon breaks this down into 3 real, practical benefits. When you're together, you're more effective. And here's the big one: you can help each other up when one of you falls. And finally, you provide that warmth, that support for each other. It's a whole system of shared strength. So from there, the teaching takes this idea of 2 being better than 1, and it scales it up to the whole community. And that brings us right back to that powerful metaphor of the flock. But here's a really important catch. Just being in a group isn't the final answer. The sermon adds another critical layer to this. A community, a flock, it also needs leadership. It needs a shepherd to keep it together, because without that guidance, even a huge group can get scattered. And then what happens? Everyone ends up isolated all over again. All right, so let's just do a quick recap of the whole argument here. It all starts with the problem, an enemy that specifically hunts the isolated. That isolation leads straight to being vulnerable and ultimately to destruction. So, what's the solution? Strength in community, being part of the flock. And what's the ultimate protection? The guidance of a leader, the shepherd, who holds the whole thing together.
And that really leaves us with one last question, one that connects all this ancient wisdom to our lives today in our very modern and, let's face it, often isolating world. The challenge this teaching leaves us with is this. In our own lives, right now, where do we find our flock? And who is our shepherd?